What happens when a sheriff, on a quiet patrol, vanishes into thin air, leaving behind no clues, no traces, and no answers? For 7 long years, his disappearance was the mystery that haunted an entire town. But then, on the exact anniversary of that day, the only piece of evidence finally surfaces: his government-issued bike, found exactly where it shouldn't be. Where has it been all this time? And what secrets does it hold? This is a story of eerie disappearances, strange clues, and a truth hidden deep in the woods, waiting to be uncovered. If you want to join us as we uncover the truth behind unsolved mysteries, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Comment your city name below. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell in relentless, gray sheets, turning the gravel roads of Palmetto County to thick mud and swelling the creeks until they spilled over their banks, swallowing fences and pastureland. It was a cold, miserable October afternoon, the kind that made you want to stay indoors, the kind that made the world feel small and silent. But in the cramped, humid office of the Palmetto County Sheriff's Department, the silence was about to be shattered. The phone rang at 4:17 p.m., a sharp, electronic scream that made Deputy Sarah Miller jump. She was the only one there, holding down the fort while the others were out on calls, mostly weather-related: a downed tree on County Road 9, a stranded motorist near the old mill. The voice on the other end was breathless, panicked. A man named Earl Jenkins, a local farmer whose land bordered the vast expanse of the Blackwater Woods. "Something's wrong out at the old Gable place," he stammered, his words tumbling over each other. "It's the sheriff's bike. Just his bike. Just sitting there in the mud, like it's been waiting." Sarah's blood ran cold, a sensation so sudden and severe it felt like a physical blow. "Sheriff Clay?" she asked, though she knew there was only one sheriff, only one government-issued bike. "Earl, slow down. What are you talking about? He ain't with it, Sarah," Earl insisted, his voice cracking. "The bike's just there, parked neat, as you please, right in the middle of that old dirt track that runs behind the Gable farm. But the rain, it's washing the mud away from around the tires. And the stuff it's uncovering, it don't make no sense." 7 years. It had been 7 years to the day since Sheriff John Clay vanished from the face of the earth. October 3rd, 2016. He had been on duty, patrolling the southern sector of the county. His last radio transmission was logged at 2:48 p.m. Unit 5 to base. Gonna check out a possible trespasser complaint out near the Blackwater Creek Junction. Probably kids. Over. Base had acknowledged. And that was it. John Clay, a man of 45, a husband, a father of 2, a man who had worn the badge for 20 years, was gone. The only thing missing was his county-issued patrol bicycle, a heavy, sturdy model he preferred for the back roads. No straged. No signs of crash. No further radio signals. He and the bike had simply been erased. The search that followed was the largest in the county's history. They brought in dogs, helicopters, hundreds of volunteers from 3 neighboring counties. They dragged the creek, combed every inch of the woods, and questioned every soul for 50 miles. They found nothing. Not a thread from his uniform. Not a fingerprint on anything he might have touched. The case grew cold, a permanent, painful frost settling over the community and a dark shadow over the department. His wife, Mary Clay, never moved away, never changed her phone number, always holding on to a hope that felt, with each passing year, more and more like a ghost. And now, on the exact anniversary of his disappearance, in the pouring rain, his bike had been found. Sarah Miller was out the door in under a minute, her patrol car skidding on the wet asphalt as she flipped on the lights and siren. She called it in, her voice tight with a mixture of dread and a terrifying, fragile hope. "All units, respond to the Old Gable Farm Access Road. Possible 10 to 79 in relation to the Clay case. I repeat, possible evidence located in the John Clay disappearance." By the time she arrived, the scene was already surreal. Earl Jenkins stood under a massive black umbrella, his face pale as he pointed a trembling finger toward a dirt track that was now little more than a river of mud. And there it was, the bike. It was caked in a thick layer of dried mud and grime, yet it was unmistakably the sheriff's. The official county seal was still faintly visible on the crossbar, and the serial number, though scratched, was legible. It was parked upright, its kickstand sunk deep into the earth, as if the sheriff had simply gotten off for a moment and walked away. But the mud around it told a different story. The relentless rain was washing the top layers away, revealing that the lower half of the tires, the kickstand, and the bottom of the frame were encased in a different kind of earth, darker, compacted, layered with what looked like decayed leaves and pebbles. It looked, for all the world, as if the bicycle had been buried and only recently dug up. Sarah approached slowly, her boots sinking into the muck, her heart hammering against her ribs. She radioed for the state police and a forensics team, her eyes never leaving the bike. It was a ghost, a relic from a 7-year-old nightmare, suddenly thrust back into the present. She carefully crouched down, peering at the ground around the tires. The rain was revealing more details. There, pressed into the older, darker soil that was being exposed, was a single clear footprint. It wasn't from a work boot or a hiking shoe. It was small, delicate, almost childlike, but with the distinct, precise pattern of a high-end athletic sneaker. A modern print, superimposed on soil that had supposedly been hiding the bike for years. Before she could process this bizarre contradiction, her eyes caught something else. Wrapped tightly around the handlebar grip, almost hidden by the brake cable, was a small, dirty piece of cloth. It wasn't from the sheriff's uniform. It was a bright, synthetic blue, the kind of material used in high-performance outdoor gear. Tied to it was a short, frayed piece of yellow string. It looked like a marker, a flag, left there deliberately. As Sarah stared, the world seemed to narrow to that single, incongruous spot of color on the gray and brown scene. This was no accident. The bike hadn't simply risen from the earth. It had been placed here. Someone had dug it up and put it here on the anniversary of the disappearance for them to find. But who? And why now? The questions hung in the damp air, heavier and more chilling than the rain. The mystery of Sheriff John Clay had just begun all over again. It was already deeper and more unsettling than anyone could have imagined. The arrival of the state police was a cold, efficient affair, a stark contrast to the raw, emotional shock that had frozen Sarah and Earl in place. A fleet of black and whites and unmarked SUVs descended upon the lonely track, their spinning lights painting the relentless rain in frantic pulses of blue and red. They quickly cordoned off a wide area with bright yellow tape that snapped and fluttered in the wind, transforming the patch of mud into a grim, official crime scene. The once quiet field was now filled with the low murmur of serious voices, the crunch of gravel under heavy boots, and the relentless click and flash of evidence cameras. Leading the state team was Detective Miles Collins, a man with a reputation as sharp and unyielding as the crease in his trousers. He was in his late 50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from weathered stone and eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Sarah's account with a neutral expression, his gaze constantly flicking back to the bicycle, which was now surrounded by a team of forensic experts in white coveralls. They moved with a slow, deliberate precision, setting up a large canopy to protect the site from the rain before they dared to touch anything. 7 years, Collins stated, his voice a low rumble. He wasn't asking. He was processing the sheer impossibility of it. And it just shows up today, on the anniversary, parked nice and tidy. He finally turned his full attention to Sarah. "You're Deputy Miller? You were here when it happened." "I was a rookie," Sarah said, her arms crossed tightly against the chill that had little to do with the weather. "My first month on the job. I was the one who took the last radio call." The memory was a fresh wound, reopened by the sight of the bike. Collins gave a slow, single nod. "Then you know this isn't a coincidence. This is a message. Someone is talking to us." He gestured toward the bike with his chin. "And they're either helping or they're playing a very sick game." The forensic team began their work. They didn't move the bike. Instead, they carefully excavated the earth around it, treating the mud like an archaeologist would treat ancient soil. They photographed the strange, layered dirt around the tires from every possible angle. A young technician with meticulous hands used a small tool to gently scrape the caked mud from the bicycle's frame, collecting every grain into separate evidence bags. The serial number was confirmed. It was unquestionably Sheriff Clay's assigned patrol vehicle. Then, the lead forensic tech, a woman named Espinoza, called Collins over. She was focused on the handlebars. "Detective, you need to see this." Sarah hovered close enough to listen, her heart thudding dully in her chest. Espinoza pointed a gloved finger at the bright blue cloth strip tied to the grip. This wasn't tied recently. The knot is tight, but the fibers are degraded. It's been exposed to the elements for a long, long time. Years, I guess. But, she paused, using a pair of tweezers to gently lift the frayed yellow string tied to it. This is different. This string is polypropylene, modern. It's much newer. It was added recently, maybe in the last few weeks. Someone found this marker already on the bike and then added their own tag to it. The revelation landed like a physical blow. It meant there were at least 2 players involved. Someone who had left the blue cloth marker on the bike years ago, perhaps at the time of the disappearance, and someone else, much more recently, who had found the bike with that marker still attached and had added the yellow string, a silent signal of their own, before presumably digging it up and placing it here for them to find. The mystery was multiplying. Collins's stone face tightened. "Bag all. I want every speck of dirt on that bike analyzed. I want to know what kind of soil it was buried in, what kind of pollen is in it, what kind of dam worms live in it. I want to know exactly where this thing has been for 7 years." His attention then turned to the footprint. They had protected it with a plastic evidence cone. A specialist was pouring a casting compound into the impression to preserve it. Size 6. A woman or a teenager. A high-end running shoe, current model. That print was made in the last 48 hours after the heavy rain started, but before the bike was discovered. Whoever left it was here, either placing the bike or checking to see if it had been found. The pieces refused to fit together. A bike buried for 7 years. An old marker and a new one. A fresh footprint from a modern shoe. It was a chaotic jumble of time, a cold case violently colliding with the present. Back at the sheriff's department, the mood was funereal. The news had spread through the small county like a wildfire, and the phone lines were jammed. Every retired deputy, every reporter from 2 states away, every concerned citizen was calling. But one call was different. It came in on Sarah's private line. The voice on the other end was hushed, shaky, and young. A girl's voice. "Deputy Miller? The bike, my brother, he had a piece of that blue fabric. From his jacket." Sarah sat up straight, grabbing a pen. "Who is this? What's your name?" A long pause, filled with the sound of nervous breathing. "I can't say. But my brother, his name was Liam. He went missing. A long time ago, a year before the sheriff did." The words were tumbling out now, rushed and terrified. He was hiking in Blackwater Woods. They never found him. But when they sent his stuff back, his favorite blue jacket was missing. He always kept a piece of it tied to his backpack for good luck. He cut it from the sleeve. Sarah's blood went cold. Another disappearance. Another cold case. Connected by a 2-inch strip of blue fabric. Liam who? What was his last name? But the line went dead. The silence that followed was louder than the storm outside. Sarah sat there, the receiver gripped tightly in her hand, the name Liam echoing in her mind. The sheriff's disappearance had never been an isolated incident. It was part of something larger, something darker that had been lurking in the woods of Palmetto County for a very long time. And now, someone was finally trying to dig it all up. The silence in the records room was a thick, dusty blanket, broken only by the soft hum of the aging fluorescent lights overhead. It was a forgotten place, smelling of old paper and loneliness, where the county's past was stored in rows of gray filing cabinets. Sarah Miller and Detective Collins stood before a cabinet labeled Missing Persons, 2010 to 2015. The single name Liam was a fragile thread, but it was the only one they had. The anonymous call had shifted everything. The blue cloth was no longer just a clue. It was a potential link to another soul swallowed by the same silence that had taken John Clay. They started with a year before the sheriff's disappearance. 2015. Collins pulled the heavy drawer open, the metal screeching in protest. The files were sparse. Palmetto County was a quiet place. People didn't vanish often. They found it near the back. A thin folder with a name typed on a faded label. Liam Jeffries. Sarah's breath caught. She remembered the name now, a faint echo from her early days on the force. A teenage boy, 17 years old. He'd gone hiking in the Blackwater woods and never came home. She opened the folder. A school photograph of a boy with a bright, easy smile and messy brown hair stared back at her. His eyes were full of life. The report was brief, the investigation seemingly routine and ultimately futile. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. The prevailing theory was that he'd gotten lost, fallen, and the vast, unforgiving wilderness had simply kept him. The case was closed after 6 months. Tucked into the file was an evidence inventory list. Among his recovered camping gear, listed as returned to family, was a blue Columbia hiking jacket. The anonymous caller had said a piece was cut from the sleeve. He had a sister, Sarah said, her voice quiet in the hushed room. Emily. She'd be in her mid-20s now. The voice on the phone had sounded young, frightened. It fit. Collins was already moving, his mind connecting dots at a speed Sarah struggled to match. If this is connected, then Clay's disappearance wasn't the beginning. It might not even be the end. He began pulling more drawers open, his movements urgent now. Let's look further back. Let's see if there are others. For the next hour, they worked in a tense silence, their world shrinking to the dates on dusty file folders. They went back 5 years, then 10. The pattern, when it emerged, was so subtle and so horrifying that it made the room feel several degrees colder. It wasn't a flood of missing persons. It was a slow, quiet trickle, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Before Liam Jeffries in 2015, there was a man named Arthur Bell, reported missing in 2012. He was a surveyor, last seen working on the outskirts of the Blackwater Woods. Before him, in 2009, a woman named Helen Ross, an amateur botanist who loved foraging for mushrooms in the same area. Both cases were filed as likely accidents, tragic encounters with the rugged terrain. There was no fanfare, no major investigation. They were just gone. Collins spread the 4 open files on a large table. Helen Ross, Arthur Bell, Liam Jeffries, John Clay. The faces of the lost stared up from the faded photographs. Al botanist, al surveyor, al hiker, al sheriff. They seemed to have nothing in common. Different ages, different professions, different lives. What links them? Collins muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. It's not random. The bike, the cloth, this is deliberate. This is someone showing off. He leaned over the table, his finger tracing the dates of disappearance. Helen Ross, August 14th, 2009. Arthur Bell, June 22nd, 2012. Liam Jeffries, October 3rd, 2015. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She saw it the same instant Collins did. His finger stopped on the date for John Clay. October 3rd, 2016. He slowly moved his finger back to Liam Jeffries' date. October 3rd, 2015. The same day, Sarah whispered, the words feeling like a betrayal of all logic. A year apart, Collins's face was grim. He checked the others. Arthur Bell had vanished on June 22nd, 2012. He flipped back to Helen Ross. August 14th, 2009. The dates didn't match. The pattern was incomplete, but the coincidence of the October 3rd disappearances was too glaring to ignore. It's not the same calendar date for all of them, Collins said, his mind racing. But what if it's the same kind of date? An equinox? A solstice? He pulled out his phone, searching frantically. He shook his head. No, not that. Sarah looked at the dates again, a deep, unsettling feeling growing in her gut. Helen Ross, August 14th. What if that was a birthday or an anniversary of something? It was a shot in the dark, but it was all they had. They scrambled, cross-referencing the dates with old county records, newspaper archives, anything they could find. The answer, when it came, was so simple and so bizarre that it defied all understanding. Arthur Bell, the surveyor, had filed a formal complaint with the county on June 22, 2011, exactly 1 year to the day before he disappeared. He claimed that while working on a land survey near Blackwater Creek, his equipment had malfunctioned wildly, giving false readings. He insisted it wasn't a technical fault, but something else, something he couldn't explain. The complaint was dismissed. Helen Ross, the botanist, had written a letter to the local paper, published on August 14, 2008, a year to the day before she vanished. The letter described a strange, metallic taste in the air and a feeling of profound disorientation she'd experienced while foraging in a specific part of the woods. She joked about it being a fairy ring, but the tone of the letter was uneasy. Nobody took it seriously. Liam Jeffries had posted on his social media on October 3, 2014, a year before his hike, a picture of a peculiar rock formation deep in Blackwater Woods, with a caption that read, "Found the weirdest place today. Felt like I was being watched the whole time. Sound just stopped. So creepy. Hashtag Blackwater Weirdness." And John Clay. His last call, the trespassing complaint he went to investigate on October 3, 2016, was near that very same creek. The date was the key, but it wasn't a birthday. It was an anniversary. Each victim had experienced something strange, something they had noted or reported exactly 1 year to the day before they vanished. Someone or something was marking them, remembering their curiosity, and then, on the anniversary of that event, it came for them. The sheriff hadn't been investigating a random trespasser. He had been lured. The bike, left for them to find on the 7-year anniversary, was a taunt, a piece of the pattern. Collins looked at Sarah, his professional composure finally cracking to reveal a deep, primal unease. They all reported something strange, a malfunction, a feeling, a silence, and they all talked about it. They left a record. Sarah finished the terrible thought, her voice barely audible. And exactly 1 year later, they were silenced for good. The mystery was no longer just about a missing sheriff. It was about a predator that operated on a schedule of years, that harvested those who stumbled upon its secrets. And the person who left the bike, the one with the modern running shoe and the yellow string, wasn't the predator. They were another victim or a witness trying to expose the terrifying pattern before the next anniversary arrived. The rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a world washed clean and dripping with a cold, heavy silence. Inside the sheriff's department, the air was electric with a different kind of storm. The pattern was now a living thing in the room, a monstrous equation written in dates and disappearances. Detective Collins paced like a caged animal, the 4 open files on the table a map to a nightmare. Helen Ross, Arthur Bell, Liam Jeffries, John Clay. Their faces were no longer just photographs. They were accusations. The caller mentioned a sister. "Emily Jeffries," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the tense quiet. She was already at her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Last known address, 214 Maple Lane. It's a rental. Landlord says she moved out 6 months ago. Left no forwarding address. She's running," Colin stated, his voice flat. "She knows she's next. She found the bike. She left the yellow string. She made the call. She's trying to lead us to the truth before the pattern completes itself with her." He stopped pacing and looked at the dates again. Liam vanished on October 3, 2015. He experienced the weirdness a year before on October 3, 2014. Which means Sarah finished the grim calculation. The anniversary of his disappearance is the trigger. For her, if the pattern holds, whoever has a strange experience and reports it is taken exactly 1 year later. Emily must have gone into those woods herself. She must have seen or felt something, and she did on the anniversary of her brother's disappearance. She went looking for answers and found the same thing he did. The implications were terrifying. Emily wasn't just a witness. She was a target, and the clock was ticking. The bike was found on October 3rd. If Emily had her strange experience on that same day, her 1-year deadline was today. But it was already past noon. "We need to find her. Now," Collins barked, grabbing his jacket. "She's our only link. She knows where the bike was buried. She knows more than she said on the phone. But finding a ghost proved difficult. Emily Jeffries had effectively erased herself. Her social media was deleted. Her phone was off, pinging off a tower near the state border hours ago, a likely decoy. She had prepared for this. She was smart, and she was scared. It was an old contact, a friend of a friend from high school, who finally gave him a thread. Ink? Yeah, she's been kind of obsessed since Liam. You know, the young woman said over the phone, her voice hesitant. She got really into hiking, like she was trying to retrace his steps. She talked about this place he mentioned in his posts. The quiet place near Blackwater Creek. She said she camped out there sometimes. There's an old ranger's watchtower, kind of falling apart. She said she liked the view. The old watchtower. It wasn't on any official map, a relic from a time before satellite surveys. It was the perfect place to hide, to watch, to wait. They moved fast, a convoy of police vehicles speeding towards the Blackwater woods, sirens cutting through the afternoon calm. The mud-slick roads forced them to abandon the cars a mile out and continue on foot, the damp earth sucking at their boots. The woods were unnaturally still, the only sound their own labored breathing and the drip of water from the pine needles. The watchtower was exactly as described, a skeletal structure of weathered wood leaning precariously against a rocky outcrop overlooking the creek. It looked abandoned, dead. But as they approached, Sarah's sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement in the topmost window. A face, pale and frightened, ducked out of sight. Emily Jeffries! Collins shouted, his voice echoing through the silent trees. This is the state police. We're here to help you. You need to come down. Now. There was no answer. Only the sound of the wind sighing through the pines. They ascended the creaking stairs carefully, weapons drawn but held low. The door to the top room was slightly ajar. Collins pushed it open. The room was a shrine to obsession. Photographs of Liam and newspaper clippings about the disappearances were pinned to the walls. A small camping bed was tucked in a corner. And in the center of it all, huddled on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest, was a young woman. She was thin, with Liam's same bright eyes, now wide with a fear so profound it was painful to see. She was wearing a pair of expensive, mud-stained running shoes. Size 6. You found the bike, she whispered, her voice raw. It wasn't a question. We found it, Emily, Sarah said, holstering her weapon and taking a slow step forward. You left it for us. What? Tears welled in Emily's eyes. I had to. It's today. It's my day. I went there a year ago, to the exact spot where he posted that picture. I thought I could feel him, you know? Understand what happened. She swallowed hard, a sob catching in her throat. But it happened to me, too. The sound. It just died. Everything went completely silent. Not a bird, not the wind, nothing. And I felt it at pressure, like something was pushing down on me from above. And I saw it. Saw what, Emily? Collins asked, his voice gentle but urgent. A light. Not a flashlight. Something else. A cold, blue light from deep in the trees. It didn't shine. It just was. And then it was gone. The sound came back. I ran. I've been running ever since. She looked from Sarah to Collins, her expression pleading. Don't you see? I reported it. I told my friend. I broke the rule. I talked about it. And now it's been a year. It's coming for me today. Just like it came for Liam. Just like it came for all of them. The pieces slammed together. The pattern was complete. Emily had experienced the phenomenon on the anniversary of her brother's disappearance. She had talked about it. And now, a year later to the day, she was waiting for the reckoning. We're not going to let anything happen to you, Sarah said, her voice firm. You're coming with us. Right now. As they led her, trembling, down the rickety stairs, Collins's phone buzzed. It was the forensics lab. He put on speaker. Collins, we've got preliminary results on the soil from the bike. The technician's voice crackled. It's weird. Really weird. The composition is consistent with the soil around Blackwater Creek, but it's loaded with metallic particles. A rare alloy. And the decay rate on the organic material, it's off. It's like the bike wasn't buried for 7 years. It's more like it was in stasis, frozen in time. The degradation is inconsistent with a 7-year burial. It's more like a few months at most. The news was impossible. It made no sense, but it fit the terrifying, illogical puzzle. They emerged from the tree line into the clearing where their vehicles were parked. The sky was beginning to darken, the sun dipping below the ridge. Suddenly, Emily froze, her hand clamping on Sarah's arm with surprising strength. Her face was a mask of pure terror. "It's here," she breathed. The woods around them fell utterly silent. The birds stopped chirping. The wind died. The world was holding its breath. A deep, subsonic hum vibrated through the air, a feeling more than a sound, rattling their teeth and bones. From the dense thicket of pines across the clearing, the same cold, blue light that Emily had described began to glow. It didn't illuminate the trees around it. It just existed, a perfect, shimmering rectangle of impossible energy hanging in the air. This was it. This was the force that had been taking people for over a decade. It wasn't a person. It was something else entirely. Collins and the other officers drew their weapons, but what were they supposed to shoot at? A light? A feeling? Don't! Emily screamed. It's not what you think. But it was too late. The blue light pulsed, growing brighter, and a wave of that same intense pressure washed over them, forcing them to their knees. It was a weight of pure silence, of ancient and immense power. It was a harvesting, and then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The sound of the forest rushed back, the birds, the wind, as if someone had flipped a switch. The pressure vanished. The blue light was gone. They were left on their knees in the mud, gasping for air, their ears ringing in the sudden normality. It was over. "Emily," Sarah croaked, pushing herself up. The girl was gone, vanished, just like the others. There were no footprints leading away, no signs of a struggle. She had been there 1 second, and then she simply wasn't. But she had left something behind. Clutched in Sarah's hand, where Emily had been gripping her arm, was a small, folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened it. It was a hand-drawn map of the woods, detailing a path to a specific location near the creek, a place not on any official map. And scrawled at the bottom, in a rushed, desperate handwriting, was a message. "He's alive. I saw him. They all are. In a quiet place. Find the source." The investigation was over. The mystery, however, had just exploded into something far larger and more terrifying than anyone could have ever imagined. The disappearances were not murders. They were collections, and Sheriff John Clay, missing for 7 years, was still alive somewhere, waiting in the silence. The bike wasn't taunt. It was a signpost, and the case of the missing sheriff was now a door, and that door was still wide open. The silence that followed was heavier than any they had ever known. It was a void, a vacuum left in the wake of something incomprehensible. Sarah Miller remained on her knees in the cold mud, the folded piece of paper a burning brand in her hand. Around her, seasoned officers were struggling to their feet, their faces pale and confused, their weapons hanging uselessly at their sides. They were trained for conflicts with people, for chases and confrontations. They had no protocol for a silent blue light that could erase a person from the world. Detective Collins was the first to find his voice, though it was cracked and unsteady. "Everyone fan out. Search the tree line. Now." She can't have gone far. But the orders sounded hollow, even to him. They all knew. They had all felt it. Emily Jeffries hadn't run. She had been taken. The search was frantic but futile. There were no broken branches, no footprints, no scent for the dogs that arrived later to follow. It was as if Emily had been plucked from existence. The only evidence that remained was the map clutched in Sarah's hand and the memory of that terrifying, silent light burned into their retinas. Back at the department, the mood was one of shock and profound disorientation. The official report would be a nightmare to write, a collection of facts that defied logic. Colin sat at his desk, staring blankly at the wall, the 4 missing persons files now joined by a 5th, empty folder waiting for Emily Jeffries' name. The pattern was no longer a theory. It was a confirmed, active, and terrifying reality, and they had witnessed its operation firsthand. Sarah, however, could not sit still. While the others grappled with the impossible, she focused on the tangible. The map. She laid it carefully on a light table, her hands still trembling slightly. It was hand-drawn on a piece of weathered parchment-like paper, the lines precise, detailing a remote section of Blackwater Creek she had never seen before. There was an X marking a spot where the creek forked around a large, distinctive rock formation. And there was the message, scrawled in a panic as the blue light descended upon them. He's alive. I saw him. They all are. In a quiet place. Find the source. Collins, she said, her voice cutting through the numb silence of the room. Look at this. He walked over, his movement slow, weighed down by a new kind of fear. He read the message, then reread it, his eyes widening. Alive? After all this time? How? What is the quiet place? I think it's where they're kept, Sarah said, her mind racing, connecting the desperate note to the forensics report. The soil from the bike, the text said, it was like it was in stasis. Frozen in time. What if that's what this thing does? It doesn't kill them. It collects them. It preserves them. And Emily saw them. She must have found where. The implications were staggering. Sheriff John Clay, missing for 7 years, wasn't a corpse in an unmarked grave. He was a prisoner in a state of suspended animation, along with Liam Jeffries, Arthur Bell, and Helen Ross. The bike hadn't been buried for 7 years. It had been in this quiet place until someone, likely Emily, had removed it and planted it for them to find. It was a message in a bottle from the missing themselves, delivered by the only person brave enough to risk the pattern to save them. But the last 2 words were the most critical. Find the source. The pattern had a heart, a center. The blue light, the silence, the disappearances, they all originated from somewhere. Emily wasn't just telling them to rescue the victims. She was begging them to stop the phenomenon itself. Their investigation pivoted violently. They weren't looking for a body or a crime scene anymore. They were looking for the source of a paranormal event. Using the map, they cross-referenced the location with satellite imagery and old geological survey maps. The spot Emily had marked was in a narrow, steep-sided gulch, an area notorious for compass malfunctions and strange magnetic readings. It was the same area Arthur Bell, the surveyor, had complained about. They assembled a team, not just of deputies, but of state geologists and a physicist from the university who specialized in electromagnetic anomalies. The journey to the coordinates was tense and silent. The woods seemed to watch them, the normal sounds of nature feeling like a thin veil over a deep and unsettling silence. When they reached the gulch, the equipment immediately went haywire. Compasses spun wildly. The Geiger counters clicked erratically, not from radiation, but from some other form of energy. The air hummed with a faint, almost inaudible vibration. And there, nestled at the base of the distinctive rock formation, they found it. It wasn't a spaceship or a portal. It was something both more mundane and more bizarre. Partially buried in the earth was a large, metallic object, shaped like a long, dull silver cylinder about the size of a car. It was scarred and pitted as if from immense heat or age, and it seemed to absorb the light around it. From a fissure near one end, a faint, cold blue light emanated, pulsing softly in a slow, steady rhythm. This was the source. This was what had been taking people for over a decade. The physicist, Dr. Evans, approached it with a mixture of terror and fascination. My God, the readings are off the scale. It's generating a localized field that warps space-time itself. A stasis field. This isn't technology. Or if it is, it's like nothing on Earth. They had found it. The mystery of the missing sheriff had led them to this. An ancient alien machine, sleeping in the woods, periodically activating to what? Collect samples? Store data? They couldn't know, but they knew what it had collected. John Clay and the others were inside, alive, trapped in a moment of time. The operation to recover them was a delicate one, conducted with a fearful reverence for the unknown object. Using the machine's own energy signatures, DR, Evans and his team found a way to temporarily disrupt the field around it. As they did, the fissure in the cylinder widened, not physically, but as a shimmering tear in the air itself. And through it they saw them. For people, suspended in the blue light, their faces peaceful, unaware of the years that had passed. Among them was a man in a faded sheriff's uniform. John Clay was brought out into the sunlight of a world 7 years older than the one he had left. The others followed. They were weak, disoriented, but alive. Medics rushed to them, their voices hushed with awe. The machine, its purpose interrupted, fell silent. The blue light died. The hum faded away, leaving only the cold, inert metal of the cylinder behind. It was over. But as they loaded the last of the survivors into an ambulance, Sarah Miller looked back at the strange object. It was dormant now, but it was still there. A permanent question mark buried in the soil of Palmetto County. They had found the victims. They had stopped the cycle, but they had not found all the answers. Who had made the machine? Why was it here? And was it truly inactive or merely waiting for its next scheduled cycle, years or centuries from now? The story of the sheriff who disappeared on his bike was closed. But the deeper story, the one about the quiet place and the source, was a mystery that had only just begun.